They told us we were safe. They said the sickness was gone. But the truth? It was only hiding, mutating in the shadows, waiting for its moment to strike back. And when it did, it didn't just knock. It kicked the damn door off its hinges. You're not just watching another end-of-the-world story. And this isn't just another viral outbreak plot where someone coughs, someone dies, and the world spirals into chaos. No, this is about you. Your blood, your body, your choice. This is a story where the only thing standing between survival and extinction is something inside you, something ancient, something unnatural, and it comes with a price. So before you even think about clicking off, let me just say, by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what they're not telling you. The answer that brought you here, it's not buried in a lab. It's buried in history, in secrets, and in blood. Superhuman blood. Stay with me. Because every second of what you're about to see could be the difference between becoming a cure or becoming the next test subject. I know. You probably think you've heard it all before. A miracle cure gone wrong. Scientists playing God. But what if I told you this isn't fiction? What if I told you that just last month, a private military contractor quietly purchased a biotech lab that doesn't appear on any map? That 14 people, test subjects, entered that facility for a blood enhancement trial. Only 3 made it out. 1 is missing. 1 is comatose. And the last one doesn't even register as human anymore. I'm not here to scare you for views. I'm not throwing buzzwords at your face like genetic mutation, classified serum, or military-grade nanotech just to look smart. I'm here to tell you what no one else will. Because if you're watching this right now, it means you were searching for the truth. Maybe it started as curiosity. A TikTok clip of a guy with eyes that glow. A YouTube short where someone lifts a car with one arm. Or maybe you saw the footage they tried to delete, the one from the hospital in Alaska. Yeah. The one where the man's blood crystallized before his heart stopped. That was no trick. No CGI. That was real. And it's just the beginning. Now listen closely, because I want to talk to you, not as some random voice on your screen, but as someone who knows what it's like to feel like the truth is slipping through your fingers. You've been lied to before, haven't you? The news gave you half-truths. The government called it an isolated case. But deep down you knew. Something felt wrong. Something about the way they rushed to cover it up. You kept scrolling, kept digging, and somehow you found this video. And that's no accident. There's a reason this showed up in your feed tonight. A reason your hands are cold. Your heart is racing, and you're still watching instead of switching to the next clip. Because a part of you knows something is coming. And once you hear what I'm about to tell you, you won't be able to unhear it. So don't blink. Don't scroll. Don't stop. I promise you, the answer you're searching for is waiting. And it's darker and more personal than you ever expected. Let me take you back 3 years. Not to some lab in the middle of the desert, but to a basement in a forgotten district of Baltimore. A place the internet scrubbed from maps, where a young man with a rare blood disorder was offered a choice: die in agony or sign up for a trial that didn't even have a name. They didn't tell him what the serum really was. They didn't tell him it was harvested from a line of blood so old it predates every genetic code we've ever sequenced. They didn't tell him it had been locked away for decades because it caused side effects. They just told him he had nothing to lose. But he did. He lost his identity, his family, his sanity. Because when the transformation began, it didn't just change his body. It rewired his instincts, amplified his senses, and awakened something inside him that wasn't meant for this world. The news reports you saw, those anomalous strength incidents, the ones they called urban myths or drug-induced hallucinations. That was him, testing his limits, tried to survive in a world that now feared him. They hunted him across state lines. Drones, trackers, private black ops teams hired not to capture, but to erase, because if the world found out what his blood could do, everyone would want it. Everyone would kill for it. But here's the thing. They weren't the only ones hunting him. There was someone else. A woman with no past, no fingerprints, and a heartbeat that moves in rhythms no human could detect. She didn't want to kill him. She wanted to free him. But to do that, she needed one thing: a sample of his blood, not to create a cure, but to awaken something inside her. Because she believed, knew, that his mutation wasn't an accident. It was a signal, a call back to something buried deep in our DNA, something older. Now, before I tell you what happened when they finally met, I need you to really think about this. What if the cure for every disease we've ever known doesn't come in the form of medicine, but in evolution? What if our bodies were never meant to stay the same? And what if unlocking that evolution meant giving up your humanity piece by piece, until all that's left is a creature that looks like you, but isn't? The government called it synthetic immunity. The media called it biological warfare. But the survivors? They called it the awakening. And once it starts, there's no turning back. Blood tests become useless. MRI scans short-circuit. The body begins to rewrite itself in ways no one can predict. And the worst part? Every subject who reached stage 4 eventually vanished. No trace. No body. Just a pulse that echoed in ultrasonic frequencies across miles. As if calling to something. And that brings us to now. Right now. Because something's changed. For the first time in 3 years, a new case has emerged. But this one didn't come from a lab. It came from a protest rally in Atlanta. A 17-year-old collapsed in the street after pushing back 4 riot officers with a single scream. The video went viral. You probably saw it on your feed. What you didn't see, the fact that her blood never hit the ground. It hovered, shimmering in the air before vanishing completely. That girl disappeared hours later. Every witness? Discredited. Every phone? Bricked. And yet, somehow, the footage made it out. Leaked by someone on the inside. Someone who wants the truth out as badly as I do. And the only reason you're seeing this video right now is because that same source reached out to me. Sent me files, coordinates, samples. Proof, which I'll reveal later in this video. But you have to stay. Because the moment I show them, my life and yours will never be the same. We're talking about a force of nature disguised as a medical breakthrough. Something that doesn't just heal, it rebirths. And the ones who survive the process, they don't just get better. They get stronger, faster, untouchable, but also unstable. Imagine having power you can't control. Strength that grows every time you bleed. Rage that ignites under your skin like a wildfire. That's the trade-off. That's the price. And as more people awaken, it's no longer about saving lives. It's about controlling them. That's why they want the blood. Why they're willing to silence anyone who gets too close. And trust me, I'm already too close. So why am I risking everything to tell you this? Because the answer isn't just out there. It's in here. In every cell. In every drop. And sooner or later, you're going to feel it too. That itch beneath the skin. That sense that something inside you is changing. And now, here's the real twist. The blood? It doesn't come from humans. It never did. The sample I received, when I put it under a scanner, it reacted to frequencies not found on this planet, as if it recognized something in the electromagnetic field. Something calling it home, which raises a question. What is this blood? A cure? A weapon? Or a message? And if it's a message, who sent it? Because I think we're not just dealing with human evolution anymore. I think we're looking at an invitation. One that's been pulsing through our veins for generations, waiting for the right moment to activate. And now that moment is here. People are changing. Lines are being drawn. You're either part of the new world or you're in the way. And if you're wondering which side you're on, ask yourself this. Why did you click on this video? What are you really hoping to find? Because just as we were about to uncover the full genome behind the superhuman mutation, just as I was preparing to reveal the truth live, the signal came through. A burst of sound, encrypted, embedded in light, that hit every unshielded device in a 3-mile radius. My lab? Gone. My files? Corrupted. The source who helped me? Vanished. But not before he left one last message. One sentence. 5 words burned into my screen like a scar. The blood is not ours. And that is where everything changes. The words were still burning in his mind. The blood is not ours. They clung to the back of his skull like a splinter. irritating, vibrating with meaning he didn't fully understand. He had seen things over the past year that challenged every belief he had about biology, humanity, and even the concept of life itself. But this wasn't science anymore. This was something older than language, older than memory. The moment he saw the encrypted signal flash across the lab monitors, he knew he had crossed a threshold. There was no turning back. Every door that once led to safety now opened to silence or surveillance. His contacts were disappearing. His backups corrupted. Even the underground forum where anomalies were anonymously reported had gone dark overnight. That kind of blackout only happened for one reason. Someone powerful wanted everything buried, but not before warning him. The message hadn't come from just any source. It came from someone inside, someone with clearance, access, and a conscience, it seemed. Someone who knew what this blood really meant. He stared at the phrase again, written in a strange hybrid of Latin and something untraceable. Maybe a cipher, maybe a genetic code. Either way, it confirmed what he feared most. The cure they were chasing didn't come from Earth. He knew he couldn't stay in the city. Drones were hovering higher than usual, and his biometric signature had likely been tagged during the last raid. So he packed what he could: encrypted hard drives, blood samples, a single vial of the crystallized serum, and a worn photo of his sister. She had vanished 3 years ago after volunteering for an experimental therapy through a startup called Nexabio. They promised life-saving treatments for terminal illness, but what they really did was collect blood, rare blood, mutated blood, blood that didn't match any known human classification. She was patient zero, and now she was either dead or part of whatever this transformation was. That photo was the only proof he had left that she ever existed. Her eyes in the image seemed to glow faintly under certain lights, something he'd always dismissed as a printing error. Now he wasn't so sure. The drive out of the city was quiet, too quiet. No checkpoints, no roadblocks, just flickering highway lights and the low hum of static on every radio station. He headed toward an abandoned Cold War facility in rural Pennsylvania, one of the last offline save zones still left in his network. Once a missile storage site, now repurposed by ex-intelligence operatives to house research considered too unstable for corporate oversight. It wasn't just a bunker. It was a library of the unwanted. Failed experiments, outlawed serums, memory drives filled with footage that was never meant to surface. That's where he needed to go, because the answers weren't just in the blood. They were buried in the data nobody was allowed to see. Meanwhile, somewhere in the outskirts of Oregon, a young woman named Ray was running. Not from the law, not from some faceless government agency, but from herself. It had started a month ago after routine vaccination triggered what doctors initially called a severe autoimmune reaction. But what happened to Ray wasn't an allergy. Her body had begun producing something her blood tests couldn't identify, a protein that reacted violently to synthetic compounds. Her veins had darkened to a shade closer to midnight, and her skin took on a low-frequency glow under ultraviolet light. She stopped feeling pain. Her dreams turned lucid, vivid, and filled with symbols she'd never seen but somehow understood. And worse, she could hear things. Whispers through walls. Echoes of thoughts. Not like a psychic or a hallucination, but like standing in a room full of people whose conversations were all being broadcast directly into her bones. She was scared, angry, and undeniably curious. Something was waking up inside her, and it was demanding control. Ray had no idea who she really was anymore. Her parents died in a car crash when she was 6. Or so she was told. She was shuffled through the foster system, her medical records always flagged but never fully explained. She'd had blood transfusions her whole life, always under the guise of chronic anemia. But now she was starting to piece it together. The serum in her bloodstream wasn't reacting to her environment. It was trying to connect, to find others. Like sonar, it pulsed when she passed certain people on the street. Some pulses were soft. Others felt like a gut punch. And the strongest pulse of all happened just days ago in Atlanta. That moment when a riot officer grabbed her and her body responded with blasts of energy so strong it knocked out every light within 5 blocks. She didn't mean to. She didn't even know she could. But now, everyone was looking for her. Not just the cops. People with no faces. Unmarked SUVs. Drones that hovered without sound. They weren't here to arrest her. They were here to take her apart. On the other side of the country, a third story was unfolding. This one far more silent, but no less deadly. Inside a government facility masked as a pharmaceutical distributor in Nevada, Subject Theta 12 was regaining consciousness. He had been in stasis for 2 years, ever since the serum triggered a metabolic collapse in his body. Or so they believed. But Theta 12 wasn't unconscious. He was adapting. His mind had retreated into a state of hyperplastic hibernation, allowing his cells to adjust to the serum without rejection. When his eyes opened, they didn't glow. They shimmered like oil, colors twisting under the surface in ways a human I couldn't fully register. The doctors monitoring him were excited, until the screen started failing. Power levels surged. Security systems went haywire. Theta 12 wasn't waking up. He was activating. And when the chamber finally ruptured, they realized they weren't looking at a patient. They were looking at the next phase of human evolution. His first words? Not a scream, not confusion, just a calm whisper, as if reciting something ancient. The blood calls. The vessel answers. Then he vanished. 2 guards killed. No signs of exit. Just silence. And a single drop of glowing red left behind on the stainless steel floor. That drop? It started replicating. The lab was sealed, quarantined, and blamed on a chemical leak. But inside, the blood kept growing, feeding on the metals, the oxygen, the data systems. It wasn't just alive. It was learning. Back in Pennsylvania, as the former researcher, now fugitive, reached the edge of the facility, he received one final communication, a video file. No source ID, no timestamp. It showed Ray unconscious, suspended in some kind of containment field, her blood forming patterns in midair like it was trying to write. And in the corner of the screen, a symbol, not a logo, not text, but something familiar. The same symbol that had been etched into one of the original tablets unearthed during an expedition in the Peruvian Andes. A tablet that predated human civilization. A tablet whose carvings matched the exact molecular structure of the serum he had spent the last year studying. He collapsed into a chair, staring at the footage, realizing something terrifying. The cure they were developing wasn't meant to fix us. It was meant to return us. To something older. To something other. And if Ray was the key, then every faction, from the private biotech firms and military shadow groups, was now racing to control her. Because whoever unlocks her blood first rewrites the future of life on Earth. But Ray wasn't going quietly. The world was shifting beneath their feet, and no one was ready for it. Not the corporations who had poured billions into synthetic evolution. Not the governments who buried truths deeper than missile silos. And not even Ray, whose blood had become the most dangerous and sought-after substance on Earth. Somewhere in the back of her mind, as she sat in the back seat of a speeding armored vehicle disguised as a highway service van, she could feel every pulse of that blood as if it had its own consciousness. Her captors didn't speak. They wore visors with no logos, carried weapons that didn't match any known military tech, and moved with rehearsed precision that screamed Black Ops. But it was the man beside her who rattled her most. He didn't look like a soldier. He looked like someone who had given up his soul years ago and was now operating solely on momentum. His name, if you could call it that, was Clay. He never blinked, never looked at her, but she could feel it. He was afraid of her. That told Ray more than any interrogation ever could. Whatever she was becoming, it wasn't human anymore. Back at the Pennsylvania facility, the scientist, whose name had been wiped from every record, whose life had been dissected, erased, and overwritten, sat in front of a cracked monitor, watching that encrypted footage loop over and over. Ray's blood wasn't just reacting. It was communicating. The patterns it formed in the air matched the frequency map of Earth's magnetic field. A perfect overlay. Her blood was syncing with the planet itself, rewriting her biology to interface with something buried deep beneath the surface. Not metaphorically. Literally. For centuries, legend spoke of ancient entities beneath the crust. Beings that seeded life, manipulated DNA, and vanished without explanation. Scientists dismissed it as myth. But the data didn't lie. The serum, the mutations, the surge in electromagnetic disturbances. It was all connected. And now, with Ray captured in Subject Theta, 12 missing, time was collapsing around them. The experiment hadn't failed. It had finally succeeded, and no one was in control of it. The twist came without warning. In the middle of decoding a new string of protein sequences extracted from Ray's leaked blood samples, a file opened on the system, a file he never downloaded. It wasn't a virus. It was a live stream, grainy, flickering, but unmistakable. It showed his sister, alive, hooked up to a wall of machines, submerged in what looked like liquid starlight. Her eyes were open, but they weren't blinking. She was looking straight at him. And then she spoke, not in a voice, but in his head. You were never supposed to look this deep. He jumped back from the terminal, heart pounding, the air in the room suddenly thicker than water. Static filled the room. Every screen glitched at once, and for a moment, he wasn't in the facility anymore. He was somewhere else, standing on a cliff made of bone, looking up at a sky with 2 suns and no clouds. A planet, not his own. Then, in the blink of an eye, he was back, gasping, alone, the file gone. And the only thing left behind was a timestamp in a strange alphanumeric format, one that matched ancient Mayan star charts. Elsewhere, Clay's team was falling apart. Ray hadn't escaped. She hadn't even moved. But the soldiers transporting her were bleeding from their ears, eyes wide with terror, as something unseen invaded their minds. One by one, they collapsed, not dead, paralyzed, mentally erased, left as empty vessels. Clay had seen it before, during an extraction op in Eastern Europe, when they tried to contain a man infected with early-stage serum mutation. Back then, the subject had screamed for 6 days straight before imploding in a burst of kinetic energy that wiped out half a village. But Ray didn't scream. She didn't move. She just sat, head tilted, eyes closed as if waiting. And then she whispered one word, return. That was when the vehicle lost power, flipped 3 times, and slid into a ravine. By the time backup arrived, Ray was gone. No footprints. No blood. Just a symbol burned into the glass window of the wreckage. The same ancient shape that now appeared in classified weather data tracking sudden storms near tectonic fault lines. And then came the breach. Deep in Nevada, the blood left behind by Theta, 12 had finally reached critical mass. It wasn't a pool anymore. It was a structure, spiraling, pulsing, expanding with every electrical current in the room. The researchers tried to quarantine it, but the blood didn't need their permission. It grew in patterns, forming nerves, tendons, even what appeared to be early-stage cortical tissue. They thought it was building a body. They were wrong. It was building an interface, something that could connect to the human mind, override consciousness, and replace it with directives from somewhere else. One technician who got too close was infected, not physically, mentally. He began reciting coordinates in a language no one recognized, his voice vibrating at multiple frequencies simultaneously. And then he snapped his own neck. No hesitation, no pain, just obedience. The site was placed under full lockdown, but it was too late. The broadcast had already begun. Social media was next. Short clips started appearing out of nowhere on TikTok, YouTube Shorts, and Reels. Clips showing people with blackened veins lifting vehicles with ease. Others bending light around themselves to vanish in plain sight. All fakes, claimed the news. All staged, said the scientists. But the footage spread faster than they could censor. Hashtags like #BloodAwaken and #NotHumanAnymore began trending across every platform. Conspiracy theories exploded. Forums were flooded. Some believed it was government mind control. Others thought it was an alien virus. But the ones who were right never posted again. Their accounts were wiped. Their last known IPs traced to nowhere. The world was tipping. And in a hidden room beneath an old monastery in Switzerland, the final piece of the puzzle stirred awake. A body preserved in cryosuspension, predating the oldest known civilizations, its blood nearly identical to Ray's. A living fossil of evolution's forgotten fork. And its eyes were opening for the first time in 12,000 years. And Ray? She was standing at the edge of a canyon in Utah, where the wind whispered names she'd never spoken, and the stars pulsed in time with her breath. She didn't know how she got there, or why her feet had led her to a place she had only seen in dreams. But the canyon opened like a mouth, revealing a stairwell carved by hands that weren't human. And she knew this was the beginning, or the end, maybe both. Then the sky cracked open with a sound that wasn't thunder. The stairwell descended far deeper than anything carved by time or erosion. With each step Ray took, the pressure around her intensified, like invisible hands compressing air until every breath felt like swallowing steel. Yet she didn't stop. Something ancient called to her, not in words, but in instinct. At the base of the canyon, hidden beneath a veil of magnetic interference, so dense it scrambled radar and rendered satellites blind, lay the chamber. And in its center was the interface, a living construct that pulsed with the same dark shimmer as her blood. It wasn't machinery. It wasn't even entirely organic. It was something beyond both, alive in its own right, aware and watching. The chamber wasn't empty. Across from Ray stood Clay, bruised, battered, but somehow already waiting. His weapon was drawn, yet it hung limp in his hand. He wasn't here to kill her. He was here for the truth. Because everything he believed in, the missions, the orders, the containment protocols, had crumbled the moment he realized Ray wasn't a threat. She was a failsafe. Across the globe, everything was unraveling. Power grids were failing, not from attack, but from overload, surges of biological frequency generated by those infected with the serum. Not everyone changed in the same way. Some developed abilities that defied physics. Others, plagued by instability, erupted in seizures or turned feral, driven by impulse rather than thought. The infection wasn't random. It followed patterns, resonated with specific DNA sequences tied to ancient migratory paths. Entire regions pulsed with synchronized energy. Governments couldn't contain it. Secret organizations couldn't track it fast enough. The blood had become a message system, a signal, and the message was clear. Evolution had arrived, and it wasn't waiting for permission. In a bunker beneath Tokyo, scientists watched as a child no older than 6 floated several inches off the ground, surrounded by a sphere of suspended water. The boy had been born with a genetic defect, until exposure to a single drop of Ray's blood repaired it. Then it rewrote him. The implications were clear. Ray's mutation wasn't just a leap in biology. It was a cure, not just for diseases, but for entropy itself. The cost? Human identity. Those who changed no longer saw the world as humans did. Empathy, love, fear, ego. They were still there, but altered, filtered through a new lens of collective memory and cosmic awareness. That was the true price, the end of individuality, and maybe the beginning of something greater. Back in the canyon, the interface pulsed once more. Ray stepped forward, and Clay didn't stop her. Instead, he asked a single question. Will we survive this? Ray didn't answer with words. She reached out, touched the surface of the interface, and for a heartbeat, everything went silent. No birds, no wind, no thought, just connection. And then the chamber exploded in light. Not a destructive blast, but a wave of memory. Everyone who had ever touched the serum, whether willingly or not, was pulled into a shared vision, a vision of the past, of the origin. They saw the first civilization millions of years ago, long before humans stood upright, beings of light and thought, who saw Earth as a garden potential. They encoded their essence into organic matter, hoping that one day, the planet's dominant species would rediscover their legacy and choose to continue it. But evolution wasn't kind. It took eons, mistakes, wars, extinctions. Until now, Ray was the first true activation, the bridge, and the choice was hers. But Ray wasn't the only one watching. In the Swiss vault, the cryopreserve being opened its mouth and let out a sound that shattered instruments miles away. It was a recall signal, a command. It had waited thousands of years for the interface to be touched. It didn't want peace. It wanted control. It saw humanity not as heirs, but as mistakes. Ray staggered backward, the interface flickering. It wasn't designed for war. It was designed for awakening. And now something ancient and bitter was rising to hijack that purpose. But Ray had changed. She no longer bled like others. Her blood was now a living organism, one that had chosen her as much as she'd chosen it. And it wasn't loyal to the past. It was loyal to the future. The final confrontation didn't happen with weapons. It happened inside consciousness. Ray found herself standing in a simulation constructed from billions of human thoughts. The cryo being faced her, wearing her face, speaking in her voice, showing her every reason why humanity should be rebooted. Disease, greed, destruction, pollution, war. Ray didn't deny any of it. She simply replied, "But we're still learning." The being laughed. "Too slow." Ray stepped forward. "Then we'll evolve faster." And in that moment, her blood surged, not with rage, but with unity. It pulled the memories of everyone who had touched it, merged them, and fed them into the interface. A new path emerged, one that didn't erase humanity, but upgraded it. The being attacked, but it was too late. Ray had already made the connection. The interface flashed one final time and sent a shockwave through the Earth's magnetic core. Not a weapon, a signal, one that neutralized the cryo being's command system. The vault imploded, sealing it permanently. Around the world, those infected with the serum stabilized. No more mutations, no more chaos, just calm and clarity. The serum had made its choice. It had bonded with a human heart strong enough to reject control. Ray collapsed. Her blood began to fade, dissolving into the ground, leaving no trace behind. Clay caught her as she fell, tears in his eyes, not because she was dying, but because he understood. She had sacrificed the power. She'd reset the serum. And in doing so, she'd saved everyone. Weeks passed. The world didn't end. It began again. Quietly, subtly, people started healing. Terminal illnesses vanished without explanation. Famine zones saw unexplainable crop growth. Oceanic dead zones came back to life. No one claimed credit. No one knew how. But some remembered Ray. Her image began appearing in digital static. Her voice in white noise. Not haunting, guiding, as if she had become part of the network. Watching, waiting, nurturing. But the twist? Deep in Antarctica, a satellite camera caught a strange anomaly. A shadow moving beneath the ice. One that matched the cryo being's energy signature, but 10 times larger. The awakening wasn't over. It had only just begun. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of inner strength and resilience. Until next time, stay strong, stay brave, and never forget your worth.